Hello, I'm Chiranjib Sengupta, and you're here with me at the Energy Connect studio at India Energy Week in Goa. I have with me here in the studio today Roland Rechtsteiner, partner at McKinsey. Roland, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, CS.
Could you give us insight from your point of view on and global perspectives on where the energy sector is today?
Yes, we just published, as every year, a few weeks ago, our global energy perspective. And when you look at how that kind of looks different to the last 5 to 10 years, it's quite impactful. Because what we have is a few fundamental shifts in terms of what's the global energy mix. And I think most notably, whilst in the past there was always a conversation around reduced volumes in terms of global oil demand, we now see actually a convergence back to like the 2018 levels and much higher, oil demand plateauing around 2035. I think secondly, with LNG or gas in general, we see a very clear view now that this is not a transition fuel, but a destination fuel. And here we basically see also about 2050, around still 25% of the global energy mix coming from gas. And the interesting part about it is that about 75% of the growth is actually coming from Asia. When you then think about coal, where originally we thought it would have peaked in 2014, we obviously currently have the highest coal consumption ever, predominantly driven by met coal for steel manufacturing, but on the other side also thermal coal still in many regions. We do have, but also a very clear view on the power side, where we see a doubling of power consumption between now and 2050. And whilst the majority of that power consumption will be driven by home and road usage, we see a significant growth in the future also driven by data centers, as well as by any kind of H2 usages, etc. And then last but not least, the renewable side, I think it's became very clear that solar PV is very competitive. And wind depends much more on the region. Here in India, very competitive. In Europe and the US, more challenged right now. And also on the H2 side, we see a deferred development because the price levels that can be achieved today are not yet in the range that the offtake agreements are being signed.
Now, with that very comprehensive update in place, how would you describe the progress of the energy transition right now, and what are the kind of structural shifts that you see in the energy markets?
So the energy transition is continuing very fast, and it's probably accelerating pace. But whilst historically it has been driven by sustainability discussions, now it's much more driven by affordability and by security/independence discussions. And I think that in itself is driving a slightly different perspective around what technology is prevailing in different parts of the world. Because in order to have energy security, you need energy independence. And that's obviously very different from country to country around what the energy mix will be.
Moving on from there, what are the opportunities that you see arising out of these shifts? And especially talking about India, what are the specific opportunities you see for the energy sector?
Yeah. So I think the opportunity for the energy sector in India is fantastic. There's a significant growth and therefore massive investment requirements and lots of opportunities. I think the second part, which is really interesting about India, is that it's a very, very wide energy mix. So the technologies, whether it's oil, whether it's gas, H2, renewables, etc., is actually biofuels, is very broad, and therefore investment opportunities across the board. And I think that gives the opportunity to India not only for investment into the sector, but also to build entire ecosystems around it. So, for instance, not only build the power generation capacity, but also build the equipment around it. And then given the scale of what you're building here, I think the ability to then also, in a very competitive way, export these products into global markets. And with that, basically not only create new industries, but also create new technologies and innovation and ultimately also employment.
That kind of growth, not just in India, but around the world, obviously comes with its challenges and headwinds. And what are the headwinds that you see ahead?
Yes, I think there's quite a few headwinds. We've seen this in many different regions, and I think you currently experience this in India as well, is the question around which technology ultimately will prevail. Because right now it's a very wide technology mix, but for each of the technology, it could be twice as much or half as much as current forecasts, because you don't know how the technology is going to develop. And I think the challenge is on how you support market developments and investments through government action at the same time. So to manage this situation between where you want to build markets that are efficient and drive different technologies, merit order, and at the same time, what is actually best for the country, also from a sustainability perspective, and how do you drive that through government action? I think that is basically one of the key issues to look at. I think the second key issue is, which is very important for India, is obviously given the size and the amount of energy demand you have, is that you achieve as much independence as possible. And again, that might actually drive different priorities on the energy mix in the future than if you purely leave it to cost or competitiveness.
And that's an excellent point. But what will then make this all happen? What are the things that are required to make this happen?
Yes, I think there's basically two things that have to happen. I think in order to achieve that independence and the energy security, I think we have to come to a place where, as said before, the markets are built in a competitive manner, and at the same time, we have a government action that supports the creation of the right energy mix for the country. And then for the independence, again, there will be connectivity to the global world around energy imports, for instance, on the fossil side, as well as energy exports, predominantly on the fossil side as well, where I think it's quite important for India to build a trading ecosystem where you are able not to depend on single markets, but can trade the commodities on a global basis.
Roland, thank you so much for your excellent insights, and it's a pleasure to have you with us at the Energy Connect studio.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was a pleasure to being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was Roland Rechtsteiner from McKinsey, and you can get more interviews like this and comprehensive coverage of the energy industry at energyconnect.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and we'll be back with more studio interviews from India Energy Week in Goa. Stay tuned.